Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from our break. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to dive right in. We have done a number of segments over time on the myths that are out there around both college admissions and also college finance. And I'm excited to welcome my colleague, who's a former financial aid officer at Northeastern University, Beth Feinberg-Keenan, to the show today to talk to us about some of those finance myths. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. This is a little weird, Beth and Beth, but all right. Well, like I said, appreciate you joining us. So when we were thinking about, there are a lot of myths that are out there about both sides of this process, both how you're going to pay for college and also getting in. But one of the things we were talking about in advance is just there are a few things that we're seeing cropping up a little bit more frequently and related to COVID and everything that's going on right now. So one of the first myths that we discussed was the idea that because students are attending classes remotely, either all of them or some of them, that schools are going to be lowering their costs. What are we actually seeing out there around this?
Well, we're not necessarily seeing colleges drop their prices as many families would hope that they would drop their prices. I think that we have to remember that colleges still have operating costs. There's still buildings on campus that colleges have to maintain. And even if your students are attending remotely, the professors and the instructors are still teaching the classes. So they still need to make sure that they're able to support the salaries of those individuals. I mean, I have to think about it one way is, colleges aren't having a party with your money. Colleges are actually losing a lot of money themselves. I mean, think about it. If your kids are attending remote, they don't have as many students or they don't have students in the dorms. So that's a lot of revenue that colleges are losing. Some colleges also might use their space to do other programs where they don't have these types of programs on college campuses currently today with COVID. So I wouldn't anticipate, I was going to say, any discounts coming through in the form of like colleges dropping their prices. But one thing I did see is specifically this year is some families mentioned to us that colleges were offering small discounts, maybe like $1,000 scholarship or $2,000 scholarship, which, is nice to have. I was gonna say a little bit of gift aid, but it wasn't substantial that, you're getting like, hey, you don't have to pay half tuition because now it's being, remote.
Right.
But one of the things that I did want to mention is, as we continue to see numbers increase, see what the schools are thinking about doing. Are their plans going to change for the spring at all? I mean, if their plans are going to change for the spring, I don't know. Is that going to change the financial picture too? That maybe they might look at, doing more or doing something for families if they're looking to go completely remote or they continue to stay remote into the new year.
Right. And probably, I would guess, and you tell me because you're the expert on this side, but I would think that what we might see is rather than wholesale, like, hey, we're cutting our tuition in half or we're cutting it by a quarter for everyone, is that instead what they might do is pick and choose who they're going to offer that discount to, the students that they would most like to have on campus, or potentially students who can negotiate a little bit extra, maybe merit money. Again, won't be every college because not every college does merit money, but I am guessing that it's not going to be, hey, drinks on the house. It's going to be more individuals maybe getting more discounts potentially.
It could be, and it also could be looking at students maybe looking at transferring, and they want to make sure that they're retaining these students because a semester off, a year off, in terms of being on the college campus, they want to welcome these students back to campus, and they don't want to lose these students coming back to campus and being able to finish their degree and continue matriculating at that school. So you just keep your ears open and ask questions. I mean, if you don't ask questions, then you're not going to know.
Right, exactly. And we'll be talking about this quite a bit in the winter and spring around how you go back and maybe ask for more money or negotiate for more merit aid. And we may find that some schools simply don't have it to give. They can't discount anymore, or it's going to make it impossible for them to operate, or we may find that they're super willing to engage in those conversations. So more to come on that, but I think in general, we're not expecting for all of a sudden the colleges to just cut their tuitions.
You're not.
Another one that we're hearing is, and this is a really tough one, right? So our hearts really go out to people whose economic situations have been completely disrupted. And so a big question that we're getting, or that people are assuming, is, well, I lost my job because of the pandemic, so now I'm going to qualify for a ton of aid, right? And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a myth.
You're right, Beth. It is a little bit of a myth, because I think that what families are seeing is they see that, hey, I no longer have a job, or I have a different job with a different amount of income that I'm bringing in. But colleges are going to look at the big picture. So with loss of job could come a severance package. Many individuals were collecting unemployment, and also due to the CARES Act this year, individuals were able to collect additional unemployment. So conversations that I've actually been having with families is, when we look at the big picture and we're looking at, well, what does your income really look like? It's actually higher in some cases.
Right, which is
So
crazy.
right. So, in the situations where their income is higher, no, you're not going to get it. You're not going to necessarily get any more money. The other thing that we've been hearing too is colleges are still continuing to look at appeals. They're looking at change in circumstances. But if your change is due to the pandemic, they're not going to be jumping at making changes. They're asking families to hold on a little bit, to wait, to see how things are going to pan out. Because maybe even it's just a furlough that you weren't completely let go, I was going to say downsize from your company, but it's a short period of time. Are you going to be back to work? Have you found a new job? So if we are going to reevaluate, what does your income look like based on this new position, this new role that you've taken on? So
Yeah.
I think I was going to say, Beth, I was going to say, I think I want, I was going to say, I recommend folks to, continue tuning in and, staying with us and listening to other conversations that we'll have in the future about going back and asking schools for more money.
Right.
Because it's going to be an ongoing conversation.
Right. And it's certainly possible that you might have been let go and you didn't get a severance package, and the unemployment is now gone. And obviously you have operating expenses on your own lives, and maybe you haven't found a new job yet. So the colleges are going to ultimately take those into consideration, but now may not be the time you're going to know that. It's probably going to be farther down. And like you say, when you know more about your own circumstances, and the colleges can better understand where you're at that point too. So tough times, certainly, and not ideal times to be thinking about paying for college if you find yourself in that situation. Some myths that I think are particularly timely, and although not necessarily at all related to what's going on currently in the world, but maybe, I do think that this is going to be a big year for early decision. I think early decision, just as a refresher, is a binding early program. You only apply to one college early decision, and if they admit you, you've agreed that you're going to attend that college. The reason that I think this year it might be more popular than it is normally is because, from a college's point of view, it eliminates at least some unpredictability. Because you can admit a certain percentage of your class, and pretty much 100% of those students are going to come. They're going to yield. And so now you only have to worry about getting the rest of the class in regular decision. But one myth that we do hear is this idea, well, when I commit to the college, I'm really telling them I really want to be there. And as a result, we're going to get the most possible money because we're so committed to attending. And that is generally not true. What can you tell us about that?
I think you're spot on there, Beth. I mean, it is not true. I mean, while colleges, definitely yield a portion of their class through early decision, they can't spend all of their money on early decision applicants. I often, encourage families to make sure that they're doing their due diligence, they're doing their research. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had this week, I was going to say, or questions that I've answered from families about applying early decision. How do we make sure that we can afford it? Is this the right choice for us in terms of getting money because we need money in order for our student to be able to go early decision. And just saying to them, schools aren't going to spend all of their money. So what I want families to know is do your research. One thing that I've heard this year, which I haven't heard in the past, is more schools are willing to look at doing some type of early read for students on merit money. Not all schools, but I've had a handful of parents saying, I've reached out to this college and I've reached out to that college, and they're willing to look at our situation to give us an idea of what type of merit money we might expect if our student is accepted there.
Right.
But using the tools and resources, asking those questions, and knowing what your bottom line is. Right. Conversation I had with a family today is, they're looking at a college and merit's important to them. They said ultimately, I was like, average merit aid was $11,000 for a $70,000 school. I was like, is that enough of a discount?
Right.
For some families, I'm like, it's not. So you have to also know what kind of like your break-even point is. Like, what is it going to be? What is a financial fit for your family when you're looking at this piece?
Right. And one thing I can share is that at the most selective level, at schools that don't offer any kind of merit aid, you are going to get, so at Penn, no merit aid. It was all based on financial need. The Ivies all do it that way. You were going to get the same package in early decision that you would get in regular decision because it was all based on a family's financial need. And so there wasn't any downside from that perspective. And the other thing to know is that most schools do have an out clause that if you can't afford it, they will release you from that early decision commitment. Unfortunately, the reality is that early decision is disproportionately used by students who do have the means to pay. And it is, if you really need to compare financial aid packages, it's typically not the best way to go. But I think like what you say, read the fine print, right? Make sure there is that out clause. If you no school is going to require you to go into major debt because your child decided to apply through an early program. But you want to be aware of what you're signing when you agree to do that, right? So I think reading the fine print is super important.
Right. And you can always go back. I mean, that's another big question is families often think that like once a student gets admitted early decision, like, and they get their financial aid package, like that's it. They can't necessarily go back and ask for more money. You can.
Of course
you might not have anything else you might have nothing else to compare it to, but you still can go back and ask for more money and see if they can make that a better financial fit for your family at the end of the day.
Right, exactly. Because if they haven't admitted you an early decision, they're hoping that you can make it work. They don't want to admit you and then lose you. If they admitted you, it was because they were excited to have you on campus. So no one ever got their offer revoked by asking a question. If we could say that every single episode, maybe we should. All right, we have time for one more question. And this one starts with my very favorite phrase of all time. We heard that. Anything that starts with "we heard that" is usually either completely off the rails or at least partially untrue. It's usually, stuff that people are hearing on the soccer field, on the sidelines, things like that. So we heard that we should wait to apply for financial aid once we hear back on the acceptances from colleges. I do know where they're getting this, but it's a terrible idea. Tell us why this is a myth, Beth.
It is a terrible idea. You should be applying for financial aid simultaneously for applying for admission. Most colleges have deadlines and also have a limited amount of money. Right. So if you need financial aid, or you're hoping for some type of scholarship from schools that offer scholarships, number one, check scholarship deadlines, because I don't know how many conversations I've had with families I thought I was going to get, and we'll come down to it and be like, you missed a deadline. Something so simple. And same thing with need-based financial assistance. Colleges have priority filing deadlines for financial aid. So it's so important to make sure that you're getting those forms filled out, because likely by the time that your student is accepted, that financial aid priority filing deadline has passed, and schools are going out simultaneously with acceptance packages with the financial aid and merit scholarship decisions. And so you'll find out hand in hand what it's going to cost you to attend that school, as well as that your student's been admitted to that institution.
Right. And I think one of the reasons that people have this idea, this is a good idea, is, well, then we won't be asking for aid when we apply, and therefore we won't get dinged because we're asking for aid, and then we'll wait, and then we'll ask for it afterwards. But if you've missed the deadlines, or the school has given away all its money, right, then you're out of luck,
Right.
and you're in, but what good does it do you if you can't afford it?
Exactly.
Yes. Beth, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Beth. I really appreciate being here today. Have a
All
great
right.
rest of the day.
You too. Okay, we are going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to do this all over again, except this time on the admission side. So don't go away.